So I'm going to be talking you through OPS, which is the online proofing system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of demonstrate a bit how you use it and also talk you through the setup process with the idea that after that you'll be able to go and use it on your journals and set up your journals. So OPS effectively works in a very similar way to e-annotation, but the difference really is that the proof is hosted on an online website, and also the corrections are hosted there too. So rather than saving the files to your computer, everything's held on the server and it's accessed there by the authors and anyone else who checks the proof. So like I said, it works very similarly to e-annotation and e-proofing. So it's essentially like an e-proof site with the added functionality that you can also make the corrections within the site and save the corrections within the site. So what happens is the authors access their proof online by getting an email from the typesetter, and they go in, check the proof and add their corrections using e-annotation. Once they've finished adding all their corrections, they then have to press a button to basically finalize and lock the proof. And that button is called the finalize or complete review button. So basically once they've done that, it stops them being able to add any further corrections, and it then sends a notification to the next person who's going to check the proof. So for example, if you had a freelance proofreader, then once the author has added their corrections and finalized it, then it sends a notification to the proofreader, and then the proofreader does their corrections. And the proofreader will be able to see the proof and also the corrections that the author's already put in, so everyone can see the previous corrections that have gone into the proof. And then once the final person who's doing the checking of the proof has finalized their corrections, the proof automatically gets sent on to the typesetter, and the typesetter processes the corrections. We call anyone who's checking the proof within the system a reviewer, and you can have different combinations of reviewers depending on how you set up the system. So the kind of people you might have would be obviously an author checking their proof, but you might also have an editor who checks the proofs, or a freelance proofreader, the production editor, and also obviously the typesetter. And I'll talk you through a bit later how the sort of transition between those different reviewers works. So now I'm going to just show you some of the emails that we get from the system, explain those, and also show you around the website. This email is the first one that you're likely to see. This gets sent to the author telling them that their proof is in the system, and the text is being based on the old e-proofing email, so it's very similar. Difference really is that they've got this link here which takes them into their proof where they can add the corrections. So first of all, that gets sent to the author. And then as the production editor, you'll receive an email like this. And this is the equivalent of the e-proof batch email that you used to get. So at the end of each day, you'll get an email like this saying, this list of proofs has been dispatched to the authors today. So we don't get an individual link to that actual article, we just get a link to the admin page where we can see all the different proofs that are available. So this email really acts like a trigger to us to then go into JPCMS, update the proof dispatch date, fill in how many pages the proof is, all that kind of usual stuff you would do when a proof gets dispatched. So then hopefully the author will do their corrections in the system, and once they've done that and they've pressed the finalize button, we'll get another notification through, like this one here. So this is telling us that the review has been done by the author, and so now it's ready for us to go in and check their corrections and add our own corrections. So this email is really the equivalent of receiving corrections from the author, basically. So when you receive this one, you'd go into JPCMS and update the proof corrections received date. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual OPS site. The simplest way to do that is from the email that we get sent. So we can just click on the link here. So this is the LaserWords OPS site, and we've got a login. So each typeset is going to have its own login, but the one for LaserWords is just Oxford, and then Oxford 123. But when you set up your OPS site, the typesetter will give you a login. So don't worry too much about that.
It's probably worth pointing out that each typesetter has their own sites and they're slightly different looks.
Yeah,
although
that's
the
right.
idea behind them is the same.
So with the LaserWords one, this is what it looks like when you come into the site. At first, you don't get anything here. So you need to look down this menu at the side. If you click on the journal list, it will show you all the different journals that are in the system. Or you can also click on PE interface, and that's one that I tend to use. So that then gives us a drop-down menu of the different journals that are available to us. Because I've just logged in with the Oxford login, I'm being shown all the journals, but you'll probably also get given an individual login that's just for that journal, in which case you're only going to have one thing shown in the drop-down. So you can choose which of those you prefer to use. We're going to look at MET, because I've got various proofs in for that one. So once you've selected the journal you want to look at, you can then set the date range of proofs that you want to look at. So proofs can stay in the system for quite a long time, around 2 months. It depends on what you specify in the setup. But that means there could conceivably be quite a lot in the system at one time. So it filters it by date. And depending on how quickly you process your proofs, you might want to alter these dates before you display them. So I'm going to set a slightly earlier start date because it's a pain if you look and then you can't find it. So I tend to just kind of go back a month just so I know that I'm seeing all of them, and then just click show. So these are all the proofs that are currently in the system within that date range. And this looks pretty familiar from when you've seen things in the e-proofing site. So we've got a list of the different proofs and some links to download them, which I'll explain in a bit more detail in a moment. And then we've got the date when the proof was dispatched in this proof posted column. And the expiry date is the point at which it's going to get locked in the system, and then authors will no longer be able to go in and add their corrections. And that will also affect you. You won't be able to add corrections after that day. We can talk a bit more about that when we look at the setup stuff. So in the delivered to column, that's telling us the author email address that the proof's been sent to. And then it will tell us the role of the person it sent us to. So this first person is the author. And we can see that they've already had a look at the proof, and they've presumably added their corrections, and they've finalized or completed the review. And it will tell us the last date that they looked at it. Like the e-proofing site, this automatically sends reminders to the author if they haven't viewed the proof, and it will also do it if they haven't finalized it. So it would tell us here the number of reminders that have been sent. So if you see that it's sent 3 reminders and you still don't have any corrections, it's probably a good idea to contact the author, because they may well not be receiving those reminders. So do you remember that I said you can have different reviewers for a proof? So within this particular OPS site, the only reviewers are the author and then the production editor. So this first row shows the author, and they've viewed the proof and added corrections and finalized it. So it's now moved the proof on to me. So that's just the PE address, and you can see the role as production editor. I've had a look at it, but I haven't yet finalized it. So we can tell by looking at this what stage the article's at. We've got 2 different links here to download the proof, to have a look at the proof. This first one, called the unshared proof, basically just means the raw proof with no corrections on it or anything like that. So that's the one that we would use if we wanted to save a copy to file in the same way that we'd download it from the e-proofing site. And if we want to check how many pages the proof is, fill in the dates in JPCMS, all that kind of stuff. So that's just going to show us the proof with no corrections on. And then we've also got a link for the shared proof. And it's called the shared one because that's the one that each reviewer will look at. So that's the one where everyone checks it and puts in their corrections. So when we come to do the corrections, we need to click on this shared proof version. That's going to open up the PDF within the web browser. And at this point, it's worth mentioning that it's best to do all of this within Internet Explorer because that works properly with Adobe. If you try using Firefox or Chrome, it will hide all of these annotation tools from you and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't work very well. And you might need to explain that sometimes to authors. Well, they do get instructions about it. So now we've opened up our proof. You can see here is our PDF proof. And the first couple of pages are actually lots of instructions to the authors about how to use the system and warning about using these different browsers. And then we've got the standard e-annotation instructions here. So the reason that they're at the front of the proof is because we want to make sure authors understand this and do it properly. So we kind of force them to read it before they get to their proof. And then you can see you've got the proof as usual. And you can see here we've got the author corrections. Just put in there using e-annotation. So you would go through and process those in the usual way. If these don't display at first, you've got a button at the top that says check for new comments, and then it's got a picture of a computer. So this button basically checks against the correction server to see if there are any new corrections that have been added. So it's a good idea to press that when you first come in, and you see the server symbols kind of whizzing around to show that it's downloading any corrections. So it says there aren't any new comments, so we know the author hasn't added any extra ones. So we've just got the corrections that are in here already. Yeah, go for it.
I noticed that the comments are down the side, so can you use this without Adobe Expedia?
No, I think you can use it with the old ones. Yeah. Yeah, hang on, there's a note about that here. I think you can use it with anything 8 and above. It might not say here actually, but it says in the e-proofing emails. Yeah, it should work. Although I don't know if you're using that within the web browser, whether it does let you move the box around. But I think Sean has discovered a way that you can detach this. So it might be worth asking him. There is some way of doing it involving one of these commenting preferences, I think. But it should work with anything 8 and above, anyway. So in terms of us doing our proof collation, we would log into the system like we have done, and then we'd work our way through the author correction list down the side. And really we're aiming to do the same thing as we would with normal e-annotation. So we're trying to make the instructions as clear as possible. We're checking that they fit with journal style and all of that kind of stuff. So here you can see the authors used highlighting to put in their comments, and they've spelt reading wrong. So we would want to actually put that in using the proper replace text tool. Now, one thing about OPS, which has been somewhat controversial, is that, I don't know if you can make it out, but in the comments list there's a little lock there, which means the author comments are locked. So with offline e-annotation, you would just delete the author correction and put in a nice neat new one, but we can't do that. So you're just going to have to put in your own correction instead of the author's one. So I'm going to use the cursor key so that I can select that bit of text, and the replace tool. So they've got a nice clear correction that the typesetter can follow. The best thing to do so the typesetter doesn't get confused about there being 2 sets of corrections is on the author one, although we can't edit it. If you right click, you can then do reply to comment. So I just write a reply that says basically telling the typesetter to ignore it. Can't actually see the screen from here to tell whether I spelled that correctly. Yeah, so if you want to overrule any of the author comments, then if you use the reply tool, you can do that. If there are ones that you agree with, just leave them as they are. Don't bother writing I agree, because you don't want the typesetter to only do the ones that you've agreed with. It's easier to just default agree and otherwise overrule it. Yeah, so again, this one, we don't really like the fact that they've written some comments in here as well as the correction text. So what would probably be best is to reply and say, typesetter, ignore this, and then actually put in a more appropriate annotation. So that's the only real change from working with the annotation, is that. So all your other annotation tools will still work, like the attach button, commenting, all that kind of stuff. There is a different way of attaching really large files, which there are some instructions that the typesetter will put into the site about how to do that. But other than that, you can use it in exactly the same way. So we would go through all of the author's corrections, tidying them up like that, and then we'd also do a quick scan through, proofread, as we normally do. Once we've done all of that, if we've finished, we press publish comments. And what that does is it transfers the comments we've added to the proof to the server. So that's basically the equivalent of pressing save. And I don't know if you noticed, before this button was grayed out, but now we can use the button because we've got some new comments in there. So I'm going to press publish comments. And again, the server symbol's whizzing around and it tells us that it's uploaded 3 new comments. So it's probably a good idea to do that periodically as you're going through the corrections to make sure that you've saved your changes. You've still got a save button up here, but avoid using that because it will then try and save a copy to your computer rather than saving it to the server. So just use the publish comments button to save things. So let's pretend that we've finished tidying up all these corrections and we've published our comments. Now we need to finalize the proof so that it moves on to the next stage, which will be sending the corrections to the typesetter. So up here we've got this button that says finalize / complete proof review. It might just say complete proof review depending on which typesetter it is, because there's been a recent change in terminology, but that's what you're looking for. So when I click this, it's then going to close down this proof, and it will actually it'll lock it so that no one can add any more corrections. That's just so that we know it's kind of moved on. And it will send a notification to the typesetter that they should then start implementing those changes. So the advantage of this system is that rather than us having to transfer it to their FTP site or anything like that, it's going to send the correction to them automatically. And it's also going to send them a notification, so we don't need to email them to tell them that we've done the corrections. So once we press that finalize button, the only thing we need to do is go to JPCMS and fill in the proof to typesetter data. So I need to actually do these proof corrections, so I'm not going to finalize it, but that is what you do.
Anyone got any questions on that?
So you've still got save button, so you can, if he's only staying in the system for a couple of months,
yeah, so, yes, in fact, I've missed something there. So if you want, what is good practice is when you've finished, you've pressed finalize, you probably want to save a copy of the corrections to the G drive, just so that you've got them on file forever. So if you click on this server symbol here, you've got save as archive copy. What that does is it just saves an offline copy of everything that's here. You don't want to use this save button because that saves a live copy. So that means if you then opened up that PDF on your computer and made some changes, well, if you open it up on your computer, when you try and close it, it will say, do you want to upload these corrections to the server? And you can get in a big model. So don't use that one.
Does it matter in order the reviewers do that?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't. Basically, it will send a notification to the next person in the chain, but those people can go in at any point and add corrections. So they'll only be notified that the proof's available once the previous person's finalised, but if they happen to look in the system and see the proof's there, then they can add their corrections.
Have a set order, but
Yeah.
when they need something.
Yeah, so for example, if we got the first email saying the proof's been dispatched, say we're in there downloading that, so we've got a copy in the G drive, but we saw that the author had added some corrections, then we could put in some replies. So like if they've done a correction we don't like, then we could put in a reply and say, oh, you can't do this, how about this? Or we could put in extra queries and things like that for them to address, and they would then see those if they haven't yet finalised their proof. So we can add corrections before it's our turn to review. So in that sense, you don't have to follow the order. Does that make sense?
It does. It's because I've got an editor who likes to make changes. He's normally pretty quick, but sometimes he needs to do that.
Right.
So if he can go in and make changes before
Yeah,
the
say
order, I notify him when I get my initial notification that they're all there, because he checks them all.
Yeah. So you would want it set up so that it goes to the author first, then to him, but he would be able to go in earlier if he wanted to. Yeah, that's right. Cool. So I'm going to close this tab, which has the proof in. And now we're back in the OPS site. I'm just going to see if I can find an example of one that has already been finalised. So I'm waiting on corrections from my editor for all of these, so none of them have been finalised yet. So this is our shared proof one, which we were just looking at, which is where we go in to do our corrections. Once we have finalised it, it's going to get sent to the typesetter, and then no one else can add any more corrections to the proof. So this will stop being an active link. We'll still be able to get the blank proof with no corrections on by this link. If we want to look at the corrections, we need to go across here, and then we've got one called finalise proof. So when everyone has finalised, this link becomes active. And then that's just going to show you a version where you can't change any of the corrections, but it's got all the corrections in there. Does that make sense? So if you were checking your revised proof and you wanted to look at the corrections, you could use that version. So that's essentially the same as the archive copy that we've saved to the G drive. Okay, so the bit about reminders, we can set how frequently we want authors to be reminded, and we're going to look at that when we look at the setup information. We can also set what we want the deadline to be. So if you know that your authors always take a really long time, you probably want to set that as like 3 months, something like that. Or if your authors are usually really quick, then it would be a good idea to set it as a short time, so that if there is a problem, it will become apparent quickly because they'll get sent the reminders more quickly. Okay. If you ever get to the point where a proof has expired and the author hasn't been able to go in and do their corrections, then you can just ask the typesetter to re-upload it basically, and then it'll be available again. So the typesetters are the administrators for this site, so they can do all that kind of stuff. They can also do things like finalising the proofs on behalf of the author. So if your author's added their corrections but doesn't understand how to finalise it, then you can get the typesetter to do that. Or if the author has sent some corrections directly to you by email, you could get the typesetter to upload them into the system. Okay, so now that we've looked at what the system looks like itself, I'll move on to look at how we go about creating the setup documents. Is that okay to do that, or has anyone got any questions about what's here? Go for it.
Does the system automatically send an email to the author when they click finalise? Because then obviously they get 2 emails because they're getting instances of something possibly to do JSON as well.
Yeah, I don't think they do get an email to say they've finalised it. Yeah, but they if they've got loads of reminders and still haven't gone in and done their corrections, it will automatically finalise when the proof expiry date comes around, and then they will get an email that says the proof's been automatically finalised on your behalf. But that's the only time they'll get it. Yeah, I think otherwise they would just get the author services notification based on JPCMS. So unfortunately, this system doesn't interact with JPCMS. So you have to still manually fill in those dates. But maybe one day in future it will. I don't know. Okay, so let's take a look at the setup stuff. I think that in the original email that Dom sent you, there was a link to the portal, and there you can download this PDF portfolio, which is this online proofing system one. And that's got loads of information about kind of background to OPS and also how you go about setting it up and some templates to use. So this is it. Because it's a portfolio, when you first open it up, it just shows you these different folders and you kind of got to navigate around it. Okay, so this email template one is fairly self-explanatory. We click in here. So these are templates that you can use and then edit. Those are the text that will be used in proof emails that get sent to the different reviewers. So you've got one that you can use for authors, and then if you've got other people who check it, like the editor or a proofreader, you can also create a template for them. I won't look at those in detail now, but when you start doing your setup, obviously take a look at those. It's probably best to use those as the basis for your emails, and then if you've got anything specific that you have in your current eProof emails, add that into those ones. So let's look at this setup folder. Okay. So this bit is intended, the suitability criteria is intended so you can assess, is it going to work for my journal? So that's best if you just have a look at that yourselves later. The guidelines give you some basic information about how it works and what you need to do to set it up. The journal customization template is the main form that we're going to fill out with all the details of how you want your site to be set up. So that's what we're going to send to the typesetter to tell them, you know, how long we want proofs to be available for, which people we want the proofs sent to, all that kind of stuff. And these other bits are just bits of information that get put within your proof and on your OPS site. So it's kind of e-annotation instructions, how to use OPS instructions. So they're kind of instructions to the author, basically. So you don't need to worry too much about those because those will be included as part of the standard setup that the typesetter follows. So these two here are the important ones that we're going to use for the setup. So the OPS transition document, let's have a look. So to look at any of these files that are within the portfolio, you need to right click and then do open file. Take a while while it installs Word, probably. Good. So this is where we set out which people get to check the proof. And in this example here, there are quite a lot of different people who look at it. So you can see across the top, we've got the different stages. And there's a stage where each person is reviewing the proof. So the first stage is that the author is what's called the main reviewer. So they're the one responsible for checking the proof. After the author's checked it, it's checked by a proofreader. After the proofreader's checked it, it's checked by the editor. And after the editor's checked it, it's checked by the production editor. And once the production editor has checked it, finalized it, the corrections get sent to the typesetter. So that's what the main reviewer is, but at the same, this is kind of what you were talking about, Louise, actually. So at stage one, while the author is checking it, all of these subsequent reviewers still have access to the proof, basically, which means they can look at it and they can add the corrections whenever they want to. And then once it moves on to the next stage, the previous main reviewer sort of drops out. So once it's moved to stage 2, the author no longer has access to it. So then we just got the proofreader as the main reviewer, and the editor and PE can look at it and add corrections. Once the proofreader's finalized it, they can no longer see it. The editor is the main reviewer, and the PE can still see it. Once the editor's finalised it, only the PE can have any access to it.
If sometimes authors want to see it now in PDF, but not always.
Yeah.
Is there an option?
Revised.
Save that copy.
Yeah. What, a final proof correction one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the best thing we do to save is archive copy. On that note, though, so OPS is just for the first proofs. So revised proofs will be outside of the system. So if you've got authors checking revised proofs, it would be the usual thing of emailing it to them. Does this this workflow thing make sense in terms of reviewers in different stages?
Could this ever be different from one specific article?
No, so this is like a setup for the whole thing. So if you had a different one for an article, you could just tell the types editor to like finalise each of those stages manually. So like you could have a proofreader person in there, but they wouldn't really exist, and you would just say.
So you could still ask them to do what you just haven't. No, it's not for journals going out. I was just thinking, well, that probably will waste you.
Right.
One might see specific article type, but it doesn't.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking, but presumably you manually ask them to just have that person when it comes up.
I think they can't really do that. They can't change it on an article by article basis. So probably the best thing to do is not include that person in the system and just send it to them offline. So you could download the proof, send it to them offline, and then add their corrections in. Cool. So, does this look like it will fit with the kind of proof checking processes that you have? You don't have any other people that see proofs or anything like that? Cool. Excellent. So let's next look at the customization template. So this is easy because we just go through. That box to go away. We just go through and fill in all the information that it asks of us. So first of all, fill in details about us and the journal, and then we need to give the details of any people who regularly check the article. So obviously for the authors, we can't fill that in because it's a different author each time. And the typesetter just uses the corresponding author email address. But for the editor, we would have to put in their address if we want them to be sent the proofs. And if we've got freelancers or anyone else that checks it, we need to put in their details here. In this section, you can specify if there's any particular documents you want them to host on the OPS site. So if you've got some extra instructions for authors, maybe like FTP instructions for sending large figures or anything like that, you could put that up here. Or maybe reminders about sending colour work agreements and stuff. Okay. So then we need to give them a bit of information about the workflow of the journal, what division it's in. So in terms of the proofreading, we need to say whether it uses a freelance person, or if it's outsourced proof collation, as in done by the typesetter. So you can still use OPS if your typesetter does the proof corrections for you. So instead of there being the production of the stage, it would be your vendor PE going and doing that. And if you, as the production editor, wanted to have access to check proofs, then you could not be a reviewer stage, but you'd just get those batch notifications. So you'd get to that screen that shows you the list of all the proofs, but it wouldn't be expecting you to finalise them or anything, which means you won't hold it up if you don't do anything with them. So this is the important bit about key timeframes. So that's how long overall you want the proof to be available for. So that's in this proof access time frame. So if you set that for a month, then it would mean everyone needs to do their checking and finalise the proof within that month's time. So if your author took 2 weeks to do the corrections, then the remaining people would have another 2 weeks after that to do it. So we can't control the amount of time that an individual stage has. We can only set the overall time. But we can set how frequently each reviewer gets sent reminders. So this is saying send a reminder to the author every 3 days. And then you can set different ones for a proofreader or for the production editor. So I'd probably have maybe 2-day reminders for the authors, just so that we don't hassle them too much. But for you, the production editor, you can set a more frequent reminder because you should be getting in there and doing it more quickly. Or if you've got a really long lead time in your schedules, then maybe don't set it so frequently. This is an example just to explain how those different breakdowns of times will work, but you can read that in your own time. So in section 6 about email correspondence, here you just need to put in the names of the edited email templates that you've created. So do you remember I showed you where there were some templates within this PDF? So you'd edit those so that they're appropriate specifically to your journal, and then tell the typesetter the name of the file, and obviously you'd send that file to them. And then finally, in section 7, you can just write any special instructions. So an example of something you might write there, let's say your journal has outsourced proof collation, but you still want to have some access to the proofs. So you could say, as production editor, I don't need to be a reviewer stage, but I want to have a login so that I can check out proofs. Or you might have a similar situation with your editor, that they don't check every proof, but they'd like to have access to them. So you could ask for that. So they could be set up to have those batch notifications in the same way that you do. Does that all seem fairly clear, that document?
Yeah.
Cool.
The author saves a copy of that proof as well, so they can always go back to it and see if there are any extra corrections going on.
If you've put in corrections that refer to them, do you mean?
No, they want to see the revised proof. Oh no, that's outside of the thing.
Yeah. Ooh, so there's some FAQs as well. So if you're thinking this sounds awful, it's never going to work, it might be worth reading the FAQs and see if someone's already anticipated that problem and found a solution to it. Okay.
So if you're just reviewing it, rather than making any changes, like you just said, if you can make the editor.
Yeah.
Can they make changes if they need to?
Yeah.
So they've got that option.
Yeah.
That probably would work for them,
Yeah.
where you make some changes, but not them.
Yeah, because if they don't always do it, or they don't do it very frequently, then you don't want to have like a month's time built in case they do, because then it's going to cause a month's delay to everything. So if you want to get a better idea of what it looks like, look in this folder. It's got some screenshots. Okay, so this is what the author sees. So when they click the link in the PDF, they come through to here, and they've got a link here to get to the shared proof. Once they've finalised it, if they follow that link again, then this is greyed out and it's no longer active as a link. So you might just about be able to make out that says additional information. So any extra files that you've asked them to host are going to be in this bit. So that says how to annotate your proof. So if you've got extra documents that you want them to host in here, then that's where they would be, so the author will be able to access them. So I think that's everything that you need to see really in setup. Does that look like it makes sense? So hopefully you feel that you would be able to now go off and start filling that stuff in for your journals. Happy to do that? Cool. So if when you're doing that you come across any questions about it, then feel free to ask me or also ask Dom. And so the next step really would be for you to fill in the setup document, create your email templates, and then you send it to the typesetter and they'll start creating the site. When you send it, if you CC Dom, then he knows what stage each of the journals is at. And then typesetter will create the site and they'll put through some test proofs so you can just check how it's working and you can also get used to it. So if you've got editors who check the proofs, you can use that as a way of teaching them how it works, basically. Yeah, so that's it. Unless you got any questions? Is there anything that you want to ask Dom? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was all makes sense to me. Thanks. Yeah.
Cool.
No question.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you very much. Cheers.